Yeah, so I spent about 6.5 years in the correlation research division, and that's a part of the correlation department, but specifically focused on all things research. And we handled everything from membership trends and just keeping track of membership data and what are the trends in like birth rates or how many people are getting ordained to the priesthood at the appropriate age, as well as looking into current issues and helping to develop and iterate on different kind of products that were being produced, everything from website to apps and in-person programs like the new youth stuff that came out in the last couple of years. And then there was also a very strategic side where we were looking at bigger issues and generational trends and just trying to see what are the problems that the church might encounter in the next few years. Yeah, a lot of surveys through the website, but we also had access to all of the membership records. And so we would pull samples of different types of members, just filtering based on the data that we had available and trying to kind of reach a good sample, trying to make it representative, scientifically valid. But we also did spend quite a bit of time traveling and doing focus groups and in-depth interviews and ethnographies and all kinds of other research methods. Everyone in our research group had some kind of postgraduate degree.
Okay.
Typically in the social sciences, we were all experienced researchers. And so there really was a lot of scientific rigor that went into that process. When I first started, I think there were about 25 full-time employees. And by the time I left, I think there were closer to 40. So we had grown pretty considerably. And that's a very large research group. I've never seen a group that size anywhere outside of academia.
When non-believing but still active, members of record get these surveys, they're always keen to screenshot them and send them to us. But it's like, what podcast do you listen to? How strong's your testimony? How often do you read the Book of Mormon? Like, how fondly do you think of gay people? Are you a feminist? It's asking all these questions to kind of take the pulse of the membership and to help the church I'll say it kindly, help the church get revelation.
So we were kind of black sheep, but we were also a necessary part of every process. Nobody could get a product approved without getting our stamp of approval. So just the way that it was structured, we were a service organization that other departments would come to out of necessity or out of a lack of information that they needed to be able to make some kind of decision. But if there was ever a pressing concern that a member of the 70 from some particular committee came to us and said, I really need to know this so that I can give direction to the entire department, then that's the kind of stuff where we would dive in and say, okay, who are the right people to give us perspective? Maybe we need to interview mission presidents and we can do that. Or maybe we need to talk to parents of young children, or maybe we need to talk to single parents. And so that really went into a lot of that planning, is just identifying who's going to help us to really see through all of the clutter and the noise and just the massive amount of data that we could potentially get what's going to be the clearest picture of what to do next. So we were working really with the top leadership of each department or above that level. So a lot of times the general auxiliary presidencies, a lot of times with members of the Quorum of the 12 that were serving on a particular committee or council. Me personally, or like the teams that I was working on, it might be every couple of months, but somebody in the department pretty much once a week at least was presenting to one of those kinds of groups. And so we had a lot of interface and FaceTime with some of the leadership.
How does this sort of an interaction play out?
That really depends on who is sitting at the head of the table in the meeting. So some of the times we'd be sitting out in the foyer waiting for our turn to even enter the room because there's some other group presenting their stuff and discussing whatever they needed to. And sometimes the secretary would come out and say, actually, you're off the agenda for today. Sorry. Come back next time in 2 weeks. And typically we'd go in and present our piece, and there might be 5 or 10 minutes of discussion and questions and answers. And then they dismiss us from the room, just explicitly like, thank you, you can go. Occasionally they would want us in the room and say like, okay, well, I think your perspective here is actually going to help us with the next thing on the agenda. So go ahead and stick around.
And on the one hand, I think it's awesome and it makes perfect sense that the church would get the best and the brightest and use the latest cutting edge social science techniques to understand its audience, to understand its customers, and to make decisions based on all that data and analytics and input. So on the one hand, like, it makes all the sense in the world, and congratulations. On the other hand, you look at the church now and it's worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and it makes you wonder, like, what's the difference between McDonald's and Exxon and Walmart and Amazon and the Mormon Church? The only difference is that maybe that the church doesn't have to pay taxes, but it's certainly operating like all the corporations would. And then you think about the fact that all these leaders get up in general conference and they present to the membership like ecclesiastical leaders, they're spiritual leaders. But then you look at their pedigree, their job pedigrees, and they're all lawyers, and they're all CEOs of businesses and advertising execs and marketing people. And there's a few educators thrown in there, but you just realize we kind of really are in so many ways a corporation.
Oh yeah. It gives me the impression that this is what I should have expected with the size of the church.
And I think the debate now about, like, do we hide this information or do we share more of it, I think has largely been settled, kind of leaning toward the more transparency approach. There's just no way to keep this information from people. Whether it's on our site or somewhere else, they're going to find it. And I think the consensus at church headquarters was we may as well at least give it to them in this environment where we can control a little bit of what's being said, how it's being taught.
And that's just what he said. Like, I didn't just make that up. That's what a former church employee said was their thought process. It wasn't driven by, like, values of, like, oh, let's see, we value honesty, we value truth, so we're going to teach the truth because that's the right thing to do. And we teach our members to be perfectly honest, and we want to emulate that. It's this kind of almost Machiavellian calculation of, like, what's in our best interest, and we're only going to be honest if we're forced to be. Did I get that wrong?
No, I think you hit it right on there.
When I first joined the division in 2013, they had just launched the Come Follow Me manuals for the youth. And so I was involved in the kind of follow-up post-test phase. So they had done kind of a big survey across the Philippines and Nigeria and the US and several different places where they had piloted this and kind of taken some survey pulse measurements before this change went live. And then we followed up and did the big survey after to see, does anything change? By changing all of the curriculum, do they have more faith in God? Do they trust the Book of Mormon to be true, more or less, or the same? I think any new product launch goes through a process like that. Does it accomplish what we designed it to? Yeah, I think they were trying to understand, is our messaging ever going to convince these people that the church really does care about our gay and queer or gender fluid members? Is what we're saying when we say we care about them, is that enough to kind of satisfy those urges to lash out when the church isn't doing enough? The consensus that I think came out a lot in these qualitative interviews was people fully expect the church to reverse course. It's a question of when more than if. Maybe it's 25 years from now, but at some point it's just going to be strategically impossible for the church to hang on to this tradition and policy that we've had for so long. And so I think at that point you see millennials saying, maybe I can ride this wave. Maybe I can stay in the church long enough until they come around, or I'm out, and kind of not seeing a way where their mind is going to change. People who are wrestling with this issue don't ever think, well, maybe someday I will be convinced to go along with the church's policy on this.
So much was fascinating out of this little clip that the brethren know that it's strategically impossible to maintain its LGBTQ plus strategy in the long run. That they know, but they knew that it was strategically impossible to maintain the priesthood ban and the temple ban on Black Mormons, but they just had to do that calculus of, like, all right, well, when can we make the change? where we'll lose the least amount of people. We minimize the lossage. Like that type of calculation just really bothers me, along with this idea of don't get ahead of the brethren.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're supposed to be prophets, seers, and revelators. They're supposed to be ahead of us. And then the idea that there's just no plan. There's just like rebranding, new slogans, but no actual strategy. This idea of the next new thing right now, that was really powerful.